Back several years ago, Whitney Houston had a huge hit song, and it was titled "The Greatest Love of All." As the words went, it said something to the effect of, I never found anyone who fulfilled my needs, a lonely place to be. And so I learned to depend on me. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I failed, if I succeed, at least I'd lived as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to agree. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Many have taken this song and looked at the encouragement to rely on oneself. And while I'm not disputing what she says, we need to have a good self-image of ourselves. And I think what she was thinking of as she wrote it was good. Unfortunately, in the religious world and in spiritual life, so many people rely on themselves. And they look to themselves. And those type of words, especially when you think about it in a spiritual sense, look at a self-centered person, somebody that's looking to themselves to get through things. And so this morning, I want us to look at what self-love does to us. And I'm not talking about having a good self-image. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about when we put our entire reliance on ourselves. We live in a world where people really look to themselves as the answer to get through anything. They look to themselves as I'm able to do this. I am able to make it through this. I'm able to get myself where I need to be. And we need to think about this problem, what self-love does to us. First of all, self-love is a problem. It is not a need. Self-love is not a need. It is a problem. When you look at the list of Paul's evils that he mentions in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. And he says, I know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. The first thing that it says there in verse 2, for men will be lovers of themselves. When people love themselves so much, when they rely on themselves so much, and according to Paul, self-love is not the greatest love of all. It is an evil that we need to avoid. The basic command, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, is because we already love ourselves. Of course, there's a few exceptions where people do not love themselves, and we understand that. And those people do need help and assistance. We have to have a good image of ourselves. We have to love who we are, but we don't rely completely on ourselves. Ephesians 5:28 and 29 tells us husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. So we love ourselves. We love who we are. Why? Because we're made in God's image. We are good people. We're something good. We love ourselves in that way. But when we truly get into that self-love, lovers of themselves, it's a different meaning. Self-love, number 2, self-love is a problem from early childhood. This is something that starts. We begin as very selfish and self-centered creatures as a child. Think about it. What is a young child's thoughts and their life revolve around? I want food. I want my diaper changed. I want you to hold me. I want you to carry me. I don't want a bath. I don't want you to clean this up. I don't want to wear that. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. That's a child, right? We understand that. Give me this, give me that. I want this, I want that. And the Bible acknowledges there's a time when the child doesn't have knowledge of right and wrong. Isaiah 7 verse 16, for before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good. We understand that children are very self-centered, and that is a point in time in their lives when they don't know any different. They haven't learned that. Romans 7 verse 9, Paul says, I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. He was under the law of Moses, and he's talking about that. There was a time I didn't understand. But we reach the age of accountability. We learn right from wrong. We see that we are guilty of sin. And we begin our journey of making corrections. And as one grows toward maturity, we have to put away the childish things. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 11, where it says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. We understand that self-absorption or that self-love of it's all me and it's all my way and you have to take care of every single one of my needs is a childish attribute. But unfortunately, some never get rid of that. A young man who is in love with himself is considered arrogant and obnoxious. Absalom, 2 Samuel chapter 14, verses 25 and 26, it describes him as handsome, but vain. But vain. He acted like a spoiled brat who threw a fit to get his way. He set fire to Joab's fields just to get him to come and to talk to him. 2 Samuel chapter 14. Verses 29 through 31. He couldn't get Joab to give him the time of day. Well, everything centers around me. He set fire to his fields to make him come. He flattered people. He spoke evil of his father so that he could gain a following, so that people would look to him. 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. You look at the way he acted and the way that he wanted the focus to be completely on him. And ultimately it led to his demise. But we see that in the world around us. We see people who still act that way. It's all about me. It's all about, look at me. Give me what I want. There's a former president here in the last few years that I, kind of liked a lot of the things he did. But man, that man is fully 100% self-absorbed. He thinks completely and entirely of himself and how he looks and what he wants and how he wants to do it and his accomplishments. And he is arrogant. And we see that, right? We see that in people and we understand that. And we understand that's not what we need to be. But number 3, if we're self-absorbed, if we have that self-love, it makes us miserable. It will make us miserable. No one can make you more miserable than you can make yourself. Those who are in love with themselves and are selfish are a pretty miserable lot. Think about Haman. Haman had enormous power in I never can say his name, Ahasuerus' kingdom. He had great power. He had great prestige. He had riches. He had position. He had honor and he had power. Yet when Mordecai the Jew would not bow down to him, despite everything he had, despite the place, the position, the power he had, when one man would not bow down to him, his selfishness made him miserable. Esther chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. He was miserable because that one guy wouldn't give him the homage he wanted. He went home. He tells his wife and his friends of all his riches, his children, his promotions. and his invitation to a banquet with the king and the queen. But he says, yet all this availeth me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. One person didn't treat him like he thought he needed to be treated, and he was miserable. He couldn't enjoy himself. He couldn't like himself. It was all about him. You know, there's an NBA star here in the last week that he's kind of made a spectacle of himself over the last several weeks. Things aren't going the way he wanted. Things weren't going the way he liked. He didn't like the team he was on. He wanted to be traded, and they didn't trade him. So he didn't show up for training camp. He didn't show up for practice because he was mad. And then he showed up for the first game, and they wouldn't let him on the plane. But he's full of himself. Well, he finally got traded this week. And there was a quote, Luke showed it to me yesterday, I think, and I had seen it, that I thought was interesting. And he said, I'm not part of a system. I am the system. Now, what kind of guy do you think he is? Well, we can see from what he just did the last month and a half. And then to go and make that kind of a quote, I am the system. Everything revolves around me. But those type of people are miserable. Those type of people are miserable. Also, number 4, those people are lonely. If we are self-absorbed and we have self-love, we are lonely. A person filled with self-love is a lonely person. When you talk about the song, The Greatest Love of All, it speaks of this loneliness. I never found anyone who fulfilled my needs. A lonely place to be, so I depended on me. It's all about me. There's an old little saying that says, I gave a little tea party this afternoon at 3. 'Twas very small, 3 guests in all, I, myself, and me. Myself ate all the sandwiches while I drank the tea. 'Twas also I who ate the pie and passed the cake to me. Very lonely times when you are that type of person. Someone has rightly said you cannot be your brother's keeper if you are caged by selfishness. Selfishness is all there is in your life. You can't be the person that you need to be. Isaiah chapter 56 verse 11 says, yes, they are greedy dogs which never have enough, and they are shepherds who cannot understand. They all look to their own way, every one for his own gain from his own territory. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 10. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. We can't provide things just for us. It will never satisfy. Ecclesiastes tells us what we need to be looking for. We need to look for wisdom. We need to be growing. We live in a selfish world. And Haman's great love for himself made him miserable and ultimately destroyed him, but it makes us, lonely people as well. So somebody once said, and this is a quote, at age 20, we worry about what others think of us. At 40, we don't care what they think of us. At 60, we discover they haven't been thinking of us at all. There's an Ann Landers quote in March of 1993. They're not thinking of us at all. But a lot of the time in the world around us, they're thinking of themselves. Unfortunately, we live in a world that is worried about me, that is thinking about me, that the only thing I look at and I think about is me. When compared to a lot of you guys and the time y'all spend in the working world, I haven't been there that many years. But I've been there enough years that things are much different today than when I started. I felt like when I first started working, especially, there were some years there in Cleburne. I worked in a job for Johnson County. I worked in the IT department there. None of us made hardly any money. We worked for county government. Our salaries were absolutely terrible. But the 3 or 4 of us that worked together were all friends. We all cared about each other. If one of us got sick, we did things to help each other. My boss, I remember we were standing over at the courthouse doing something, and he got the phone call that his wife had had an aneurysm explode in her head and had collapsed, and they were taking her to the hospital. He spent the next 2 or 3 months in and out of the office, caring for her. What did we do? We found ways to provide food for them. We found ways to help their family. We did everything we could to assist him. We all doubled up on jobs. I doubled up doing his job, so somebody else doubled up doing my job to help cover, so we could cover things. We helped each other. We cared for each other. We looked to each other. We weren't worried about our step up or where we were going in our career or what. We were friends, and we were there to work together and to help each other out. Today, it seems like so many people are more worried about undermining and doing those little things to try to get them ahead, to try to move in with the boss, to try to undermine you, to try to cut you so that they can move up the chain. And you see that a lot more instead of the way people should be. But people that act like that are lonely because they don't have friends. They don't have people that will help them because of the way they act. Number 5, self-love is sinful. Self-love is sinful. For those who love seeking, or for those who love themselves, they're not only selfish, but they are sinful. Romans 2 verse 8, it says, "But to those who are self-seeking, and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation, and wrath." What is it saying? When you obey unrighteousness, you are self-seeking. You are looking to please yourself, a desire to put oneself forward, a partisan spirit. And this word is found before New Testament times only in Aristotle, where it denotes a self-seeking pursuit of political office by unfair means. It's the same word. James speaks against having self-seeking or self-promoting in our hearts. James 3 verse 14. "If you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth." Philippians 3 verse 19. "Whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who set their mind on earthly things." People who seek to serve and please themselves rather than God, and their mind is on earthly things. Luke 9 and verse 23 tells us, "Then he said to them all, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Me is always at the bottom of all sin. One little word, when you get into lust, pride, covetousness, self-will, fornication, all of these different things, it is all some form of me. Why? Because it's what I want. It's what I want to do. It's the way I want to feel. It's where I want to be. We don't think about anybody else. We don't think about the people around us, and we sure don't think about God. Self-love, though, number 6, ultimately it brings about destruction. Ultimately brings back destruction. Self-love leads not only to selfishness and sin, but leads to self-destruction. According to the book, Dancing with a Shadow, the Eskimos devised a way of killing wolves. They planted a knife in the ice with the handle buried. Then they would put chunks of fresh meat on the blade and let it freeze. The wolves would smell the blood from afar, and they would come to devour it. And as they licked the frozen meat, they worked themselves into a frenzy. And they would cut their tongues on the razor sharp blade, and they would begin feeding their hunger with their own blood. They would lick until they slowly bled to death. They didn't recognize the danger. They were so absorbed in satisfying that taste of blood that they weren't understanding what they were doing to themselves. When we fail to recognize the danger and sin of selfishness, we are in danger of self-destruction just like the wolves. The worst thing about self-love is that one will lose their soul. Romans chapter 2, verses 8 through 10, to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation and wrath, tribulation and anguish on every soul of man who does evil, of the Jew first and also of the Greek. But glory, honor, and peace to everyone who works what is good, to the Jew first and to the Greek. Self-love leads to destruction. This is an important lesson because, again, as I brought out, we've got this world around us that thinks only of themselves. We've got this world around us. I don't need to go worship God. I don't need to obey God. I don't need to live a life that way. I need to give in to the desires. I need to give in to the passions. It's okay to do those things. God would want me to be happy. It's all about fulfilling the desires of myself. And it's a very lonely place to be. It's a very dangerous place to be. But that's the world around us. We've got to get rid of self-love. We've got to get rid of the misery, the sin, and the destruction it brings. We're told as Christians that we need to put others before ourselves. We need to think about other people before we think about ourselves. We care for other people. We worry about other people. We look to help other people. Why? God tells us to do that. What does that mean? Well, it can start by something small. You know, I talk a lot about how much I love DFW traffic. Am I really in such a hurry that I can't let that one car merge in? You know, I've got to just push myself forward and not let that person in. Is it so bad for me that I can't let that person have that parking space and I pull around and find another one a little further off? Oh no, I have to take 20 more steps. But we do that, don't we? We don't think about the other people. We think about ourselves. Well, I've got to get that spot right up there in the front. I'm in a hurry. We do it. I can't wait on that individual. I can't stop it. You know, we get frustrated and we get upset because somebody's going so slow. Or somebody's not moving, or somebody pulled out in my way. You know what? That truck that's pulling that great big huge bulldozer on the back of it, and he's going 20 miles under the speed limit, he can't do anything about it. He's not out there to make your day miserable. He's just trying to get that bulldozer delivered. It's taken every ounce of power that he has on that truck to do it. I need to have a little patience and think about that guy who's having to drive that big mess of machinery up and down the freeway in Dallas-Fort Worth. Isn't he having a great day? I heard Olita talking about her son driving the cattle truck and how much fun that can be going through Dallas-Fort Worth. You know what? I might have to smell the cattle smell for a couple of miles. You know, there's one little section, and I use driving as an example because it's one of the worst right now. There's one little section of road on 820. The service road has a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, and it's got signs posted multiple times up and down that section of road. Speed limit, 35. I've had people flash their lights at me. I've had people honk at me. I've had people give me rude gestures. I've had people roll down their window and yell at me through their window because they're unhappy because I'm driving 35 miles an hour down that section of road. How do I treat the people on the other end? How do I treat that cashier when I walk up there and she's just a wreck? A little guy at McDonald's yesterday, he wasn't real organized, but I could sure tell he was busy. We didn't get a straw. I could have turned around and gotten really ugly because he didn't give me a straw. Or I can tell Luke, take the lid off and drink it without the straw and everything will be okay. How do we treat people? How do we act? That's the first step, because if I don't care about myself, I care about them, and I want them to have a good day. I want them to feel better. I want them to be happy. I want them to feel good in their day. Doing that will bring joy, it will bring righteousness, and it will bring eternal life. I want to end with, this is called the prayer of single-mindedness. It says, I don't want to argue theories of inspiration, but to submit to your word. I don't want to explain the difference between eros, philos, and agape, but I want to love. I don't want to sing as if I mean it, but I want to mean it. I don't want to tell it like it is, but to be like you want. I don't want to think others need me, but that I need others. I don't want to tell others how to do it, but to do it myself. I don't want to have to be always right, but to admit when I'm wrong. I don't want to be a professional, but a friend. I don't want to be insensitive, but to hurt when other people hurt. I don't want to scorn the cliches of others, but to mean everything I say, including this. Who are we worried about? Who do we get upset about? Are we focused on ourselves? Are we focused on our needs? Or are we focused on God and what God wants from us? What God has told us He needs us to do, the way He needs us to live? Are we focused on other people and how they need things done, or what they need done in their lives, or how they need me to act, or the things they need me to do? What is my focus? To be the Christians we need to be focused on others, and we need to be focused on God. And that's hard. That can be hard, and that can be difficult, because we've been so ingrained in our characters that we can make it ourselves. The greatest love of all is not loving myself. The greatest love of all is what God loved us. He loved us so much that He sent His Son to this earth to die on a cross for people who weren't even obeying Him. That's the greatest love of all. The greatest love I can have is serving God, loving Him, loving the people around me. What type of person am I? Let's think on that as we go through this week. If we can help you with anything this morning, please come as we stand and sing.